Well everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra and see how this phone holds up in 2024. Now, I will tell you, I think Samsung has done an amazing job on basically all the phones they've ever made. I feel like, that's kind of an overstretch of a statement, but I feel like the Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra was a very, very amazing standpoint and entry point for their whole entire Ultra lineup. I think this may have been the first Ultra phone Samsung's ever made. There may have been like one spin-off before, but this thing was definitely an Ultra phone of that time. It came out in 2020, and I remember when this phone came out because it was such an amazing device. I never got my hands on the S20 Ultra until a little bit later after I got the S20. I think that's what happened, and I like the S20 a lot, and the S20 Ultra was definitely a phone that was, it seemed like at first a bigger version of the S20, and that's completely true, but I do think since then Samsung's kind of found their footing for their Ultra lineup, and I'm very happy about that. Because now when you take a look at the Ultra phone compared to the base model phone, you can definitely see there's massive differences between them. And I'm happy they made those differences because when you're spending so much more money, you'd expect so much better of a device. And I will tell you, even with our first generation S20 Ultra was a very, very good phone for sure. Now, if you want to pick up some phones I would recommend buying this year, links will be down in the description. You can get that from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the outside of the Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra, this particular phone on the front had a massive 6.9-inch dynamic AMOLED display. It was 1440p, 120Hz, and it was a very good looking display. I still feel like this particular phone's display looks very good, and it's easily still one of the best displays they've ever made. Clearly the S23 Ultra and S22 Ultra are better, but this thing was a very good looking display too, which I loved a lot. So with something like the S20 Ultra, you're getting a very good display, very little like bezel around it, which is very nice. And I would tell you before, I do think that if you're getting a device like this, it's a very good looking display still. Now there probably are some other reasons why I probably would not recommend buying this phone anymore, but I do think that this is a very good looking display, and I think that's a very good thing going on for it, and it's a whole bunch display at that. Now some other big things to keep in mind, you are still getting that USB Type-C port on the bottom with Samsung DeX, which is great, but this phone has a really interesting feature that basically some other devices don't really have, and that is basically that microSD card slot. You basically get that, microSD card slot on this particular phone, which is so cool. A lot of other devices are not giving you that type of capability, which is really insane, but this particular device is a really cool thing. The fact that it has that, microSD card slot is very cool, and that, again, in and of itself is a very, very cool thing going on for this particular phone. Now, beyond that, some other big assets for this type of device, you're getting that standard glass back on the back of this phone, which looks pretty good. I'm a fan of it. Doesn't really look that terrible here. You're still getting a quadruple camera setup. So it's like a 3 camera setup, kind of more 4. So it's a very good camera. You're getting that telephoto lens, which allows you to zoom in a lot. You're getting wireless charging, reverse wireless charging. You're getting a lot of stuff inside of this phone, IP certification as well. There's still a lot of stuff, hardware-wise on this phone that is killer. It is a very good phone from the hardware perspective, and as I mentioned for a long time now, that is one of my most favorite things going on for this particular phone. The fact that this phone performs so well from that perspective is amazing, and I love having a phone that's like this because, it's a very good phone. Even though it's a little bit older, it's still giving you like insane value because it's just such like an insanely, because hardware-wise, it's like the best flagship they made at the time, which was amazing. So from that perspective, that kind of covers it up there. Now from the camera side of things, I'll tell you, like I said before, very, very good, decent camera on this thing still. So when it first came out, it was probably one of the best cameras of that year. It had that 108 megapixel wide-angle lens, 48 megapixel periscope telephoto lens, 12 megapixel ultra-wide sensor, and then a 0.3 megapixel depth lens. And on the front, it had that 40 megapixel wide-angle lens. Now you could do 4K at 60 on the front and the back of this phone, but you can also do 8K on the back of the S20 Ultra. And as I've said before, very good type of build and very good type of camera on this thing. The only disadvantage I would say at that time on this particular phone was the fact that it basically had that, the lack of, Snapchat, Instagram, those type of applications weren't performing the best with this type of camera. But beyond that, I still look at a phone like the S20 Ultra and I'm like, wow, this is a very, very decent camera for this day and age. So with a phone like the Galaxy S20 Ultra, you're still getting all those awesome and amazing features that Samsung threw in within this particular device, which is amazing. And you're also still getting like a lot, fairly good, capability behind this camera too, hardware-wise. So personally for me, I like this camera. Is it perfect? Probably not, but it's still a very good, decent camera in this day and age. And I'm still a fan of the way this particular, camera kind of looks in this day and age. But I will tell you, the S21 Ultra, S22 Ultra, S23 Ultra, all those phones have made big, changes and big progress for these types of devices, so you don't have to just go and buy this one, but this one still has a lot of capability from that camera side as well. So that kind of covers it up there. Now, in terms of software and longevity, like I said before, this is probably the main reason why I wouldn't really recommend buying this particular device anymore. So with something like the Galaxy S20 Ultra, the disadvantage of this particular phone, which is kind of sad, is that it's not really going to be getting that next generation of software. In fact, it's pretty much done getting software support as far as we can tell. So it stopped at Android 13 and, it didn't get One UI 6. And even though we're at One UI 6 right now, this phone is pretty much done. I would still recommend buying this phone maybe like last year. And honestly, if you still need to buy a phone and you're in a pinch, Android 13 really isn't even that outdated. Like, it's still perfectly okay for the most part. So you're not really going to be missing out on too much here either, to be completely honest. Like, if you still use an Android 13 device in this day and age, you're probably going to be fine. And you're not really going to be feeling like you missed out on, too many things. On the flip side though, with the Android 13, there are so many more advantages of buying a phone that's a little more, current. So if you have the option, if you have the ability to, I would just recommend updating your phone from that perspective. But if you can't, or if not, then just go and buy something like the Galaxy S21 Ultra, S23 Ultra, and buy one of those devices, and it's definitely going to be giving you a better experience there. So that kind of covers it up there as well. Now, performance-wise, this one had that Qualcomm Snapdragon 865 chipset with 12 gigabytes of RAM on the base model, but it did go up to 16 gigs of RAM. And what's crazy here, I don't know why, Samsung has actually lowered the amount of RAM for these particular devices. So now they start at 8 gigabytes or something, and they go up to 12 or 16. This phone had a higher starting storage, for RAM than those ones. So I don't really understand it. I hope it never went like that. Again, there's nothing we can really do at this point, but that's actually an insane thing. And every time I think about that, I'm always I don't know why they ended up doing that. But regardless, this phone's performance is still fairly good. The only thing that's kind of lacking is obviously when you're opening up applications, when you're loading up apps, it can take a longer period of time. And the graphics within certain applications can be a little bit glitchy depending on the game that you're playing, especially with that older chipset. I do feel like since the HN1s, Samsung's been making big strides, or Qualcomm's been making big strides for their chipsets. So it kind of would make a little bit more sense, and it would be better devices overall to buy those particular devices, in my opinion. But regardless, I still feel like this is a fairly good phone, from a performance side. Although it's not perfect, I still think it kind of gets the job done. And that's just kind of what happens in my opinion. If you couldn't tell, the hardware of this phone is pretty much good. It's still a very good, hardware supported phone. It's going to hold up very well against the majority of phones that came out nowadays. The only problem I have with this particular phone, as you probably have guessed, is the software. I feel like the software of this phone is fairly outdated, and that's just the biggest disadvantage when you're buying this phone, that you're just buying a phone that just isn't really supported with software anymore. So it's only one generation behind, so you would kind of have to make that call yourself if you're okay with missing out on features for the next generation or two. If you are, then by all means go for it. But if you're not, then you may want to go and buy a phone that is still supported with software, something like the S21 Ultra at the bare minimum, or the S22 Ultra if you want a little bit of a better device. So that pretty much covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.